When the lines of performance and high style cross, it creates a pretty special car. The Dodge Charger was one of those cars. In 1966, Dodge rolled out a truly new design, and the car-loving world took notice. The Dodge Charger was a leap forward in 60s car design, and it dared to do what very few other cars, and practically no muscle cars, did, which was to offer extreme performance with exceptional luxury. Until the Charger, Dodge's fast cars were a little on the plain side. Dodges were fast thanks to the most impressive array of engines this side of the jet propulsion laboratory. But when it came to cool, they left a little to be desired. The Charger fixed all that with one swing of the bat. Its roofline was the most radical of any mid-sized car on the market. Its trimmings were Chrysler plush. And when you stepped on the gas, you knew where the name Charger came from. But the Charger was a car with a purpose, and that purpose was super speedway racing. This was 1966, and the big game in town was NASCAR. No other racing was as exciting as the 180-mile-per-hour fender banging at Daytona and Darlington. With its new look aerodynamic styling, the Charger was a direct assault on these big tracks. Dodge was Chrysler's hot rod division, and the Charger was proof that Dodge wasn't messing around when it came to stock car racing. When it debuted in 1966, it was the first effort by a major manufacturer to build a car from bumper to bumper with racing aerodynamics as its major styling influence. But Dodge was also Chrysler's cool car division, which meant that even though the Charger's shape was designed for high-speed competition, the car had to have a page full of luxury options to go with all that go-fast.
The Charger was a lot more upscale. The Charger, I guess you could say, was somewhat like a T-Bird in that it was appealing to people of higher income, maybe a little bit more discerning taste, so to speak.
The Charger was also bigger than most muscle cars, which was both a blessing and a curse. Size was good when it came to luxury and comfort, but size wasn't a plus when it came to the stoplight Grand Prix. But Dodge had no intention of building a wimpy muscle car. They solved this power-to-weight problem by simply adding more power. Thanks to the Charger's size, every engine in Dodge's impressive array of high-horsepower motors fit very nicely inside the Charger's engine compartment. The baseline Charger power plants weren't very potent, but there was plenty of room under the hood for everybody's favorite bonsai motor, the 426 Hemi. Checking the right option block would build a Charger for any purpose, from street styling to smoking them down the quarter mile. This was truly a car that could do it all. This ability to look right at home in the drive-in, the country club, or the staging lanes made the Dodge Charger one of America's all-time favorite muscle cars. Rich Panks is a collector car broker who keeps an eye on the cost and availability of these cars.
The Dodge Charger, it's one of the top-notch luxury cars, becoming one of the most sought-after muscle car around. To get a car like that nowadays, it's become one of the rare things to find.
Regardless of all that, though, the Charger will be best remembered for mixing it up at places like Daytona, Darlington, and Talladega. That's where this car really made its reputation. And that's where we'll pick up our story when the American muscle car returns. When Dodge entered stock car racing in the early 50s, it was a real anything-goes kind of sport. Every kind of car under the sun was mixing it up out there on the track. But with the red Ram Hemi engine, Dodge soon established a reputation for being fast enough to win and strong enough to go the distance. Dodge had a reputation for making lightweight, huge horsepower cars, and they rode this winning formula all the way through the swinging 60s. In 1958, the Hemi gave way to the 413 wedge engine. This power plant and its bored-out brother, the 426 Wedge, eventually produced some all-world super stock drag racers, the Max Wedge Dodge Coronets. When Chrysler reintroduced the Hemi in 1964 as an all-out race motor, drag racing and stock car racing both became play yards for the cars from Dodge and Plymouth. But even though Mopars were the cars to beat on America's racetracks, all was not well in their showrooms across America. By mid-1964, the very young, very lucrative muscle car market segment was dominated by cars that looked a lot more youthful than the mid-sized Mopars. Dodge felt the heat in particular because they were Chrysler's Think Young division. But Dodge had a plan. When the rest of the world, including their sister division, Plymouth, jumped into the pony car market, Dodge elected to go with a much larger car. To some, this looked like old thinking, but the car Dodge had on the drawing board was going to grab all the attention.
Dodge did something unusual. Instead of building a pony car, they really built a very nice intermediate in the Charger. They took kind of a different path than Ford did, and also GM later with the Camaro and Firebird.
In the summer of 1965, Dodge rolled out an experimental show car called the Charger 2, which was created by designing a swoopy fastback roof and sticking it onto a basic 66 Coronet body. The reaction from the general public was astounding.
It tended to polarize people. You either loved it or you hated it. At the time, a lot of people didn't particularly care for it, and then of course the people that bought the cars loved it.
By late 1965, the Charger was a reality. The 66 Charger's styling was the most forward-leaning of any car anywhere. From the flush grille with its hidden headlights to the fender-to-fender taillight panel with Charger spelled out in chrome letters, the car demanded your attention. Even the side panels, which were pulled from the Coronet, looked sculpted especially for this car. By far the most arresting design feature of the 66 Charger was its roofline. It was pure fastback from the top of the windshield to the taillights, and it incorporated a flat piece of rear glass that was more of a skylight than a rear window. And if you could stop looking at the Charger's body long enough to get inside, you were surrounded by an interior that was as upscale as anything on the road, but designed to make you feel racy. 4 individual bucket seats and a console that ran the length of the interior dominated the passenger compartment. And the dash featured instrument pods that were part race car and part spacecraft. Among the Charger's unique interior features were the individual fold-down rear seat packs, which held implications for carrying a lot of luggage or sneaking several friends into the drive-in movie. Dodge billed this car as a luxury hot rod, and they were right on. Most of the car's upscale equipment was standard, including the wood rim steering wheel and a floor-mounted automatic or 4-speed transmission. The 66 Charger's base engine was the Lopo 318, but its other engine options upped the performance curve very quickly. You could opt for the mid-size 361 two-barrel with 265 horsepower or the torquey 325-horse 383. But the engine that put the Charger on the map as a big-time performance car was the 426 Street Hemi. The Hemi engine could make a muscle car out of a pile of bricks. But in a car like the Charger, it created the most desirable new car of 1966. The public responded by taking over 37,000 66 Chargers home that year. But Dodge saw an even brighter future for their new car, and that future started at America's stock car tracks. We'll be back as the Charger goes racing on the American muscle car. The Charger's debut as America's newest NASCAR contender started very publicly by winning one of the 225-mile qualifying races for the Daytona 500. Soon, though, it became apparent that Dodge's first attempt at aerodynamics for the high banks needed a little tweaking. Even though the fastback was great at reducing drag, the Charger's long flanks actually created rear-end lift at high speeds. NASCAR finally allowed the Charger teams to bolt a small lip spoiler to the trunk lid, creating some badly needed downforce. Sam McQuagg's Charger won the Daytona Firecracker 400 in July, and David Pearson won the 1966 NASCAR Driving Championship in a Cotton Owens Dodge, making the Charger a winner in its first NASCAR season. So for 1967, Dodge brought this winning combination back mostly unchanged. The fastback body and all the deluxe trimmings were still there, with just a few minor changes to the package. New upholstery patterns graced the interior, and the long front-to-back console was now an option rather than standard equipment. Even though the Charger was aimed at the luxury market, Dodge didn't forget to put some punch in the car. And for this year, there was one other prime mover on the option list, the 440 Magnum power plant. The 440 Magnum was the be-all and end-all of the mighty Max Wedge engines. It began life as Chrysler's big car engine, making 350 horsepower and enough low RPM torque to push land yachts down the road with all their power accessories humming. But in Magnum trim, this engine featured new high-flow cylinder heads with larger valves, a wilder cam, and a big Carter AFB 4-barrel carburetor. With a new free-flowing exhaust system, the 440 Magnum produced 375 horsepower at 4,600 RPM and 480 stump-pulling foot-pounds of torque at 3,200 RPM.
440 was really a very good street engine. In fact, most Mopar people will consider the 440 the better street engine than the 426 Hemi.
The 440 Magnum's ability to produce gobs of low-end torque and its bargain price tag, which was almost $300 less than the Hemi, made it America's newest street monster. Unfortunately for Dodge, though, the Charger wasn't enjoying the same popularity on the street that it was receiving on the NASCAR tracks. The competition for the hearts and minds of muscle car buyers had a bunch of new players in 1967, and leading this pack were the new pony cars, like the Firebird and the Camaro. The Charger was already bigger and more expensive than most intermediate muscle cars, and those new smaller road rockets just complicated Dodge's situation. Sales of the Charger fell to less than 16,000 cars this year, and it was time for a facelift. The car Dodge revealed for 1968 immediately caused everyone to forget about the first-generation Chargers. Where the first Chargers were wedge-shaped, this one was an arrow. For 1968, instead of being a fastback Coronet, the Charger's sheet metal was all its own. Its flanks were tapered from front to back, and this time the little trunk lid spoiler was designed in. The car still had the signature hideaway headlight look, but a glance down the side of the car showed a definite Coke bottle curve in its flanks. Instead of flush rear glass, the backlight was now tunneled in between a pair of sail panels. This allowed better rear visibility while maintaining the Charger's racy fastback look. Inside, the rich kid theme continued with a new design instrument panel which featured a 150 mile-an-hour speedometer and a full gauge package. Under the hood, the Charger's engine options stayed the same this year, with the all-new Charger RT option featured the 440 Magnum and the TorqueFlite automatic trans as standard equipment. Sales of the Charger rebounded remarkably in 1968, with some 96,000 cars hitting the streets. At last, the Charger was becoming one of America's favorite muscle cars. But the new body style wasn't all the racing teams had hoped for. Stay with us as the Charger's designers go back into the wind tunnel on the American muscle car. '68 was turning out to be a difficult racing year for the Dodge boys. The new Charger's recessed grille and the tunnel back rear window were causing problems on the superspeedways. Meanwhile, Ford's new Torino, which looked like a close copy of the '66 and '67 Chargers, was cleaning up. With engine power at the max, there was only one way to go faster: aerodynamics. By June of 1968, Chrysler's engineers rolled out a new version of the Charger, made especially for the race teams. And thanks to hours in the wind tunnel, the engineers had eliminated both of its trouble areas. The recessed grille, which had acted like a giant air scoop, was gone, replaced by flush grille work and fixed headlights, borrowed from the '68 Coronet. The tunnel around the rear glass area, which had created a lot of lift, was now smoothed out, and a new rear window was installed, creating another Charger Fastback. These two changes, along with the Charger's sculpted sides and the built-in rear spoiler, gave this car a huge aerodynamic advantage over the standard Charger body style. However, NASCAR's rules said that 500 cars had to exist to qualify a car for competition. So Dodge assigned the task of building this car to a specialty automotive company called Creative Industries. They didn't quite hit 500, but they came close enough. Ready in time for the 1969 NASCAR season, the race teams hit the tracks with this new car they now call the Charger 500.
Everybody thought it was named after, you know, the 500 Talladegas, the Daytonas, and in fact it wasn't. It was named after the 500 production cars that had to be built.
The Charger 500 came within a fender of winning the Daytona 500 this year. This kind of result from a new car would have delighted just about anyone. But for Chrysler's racing engineers, it wasn't good enough. So back they went into the wind tunnel, leaving the Charger 500 to make a name for itself on the street. The few Charger 500s that made it to the streets didn't even try to hide their racing pedigree. At first, the standard engine was the 426 Hemi, but this was soon changed to the 440 Magnum. 500 emblems were placed on the grille and tail, and a striking bumblebee stripe wrapped around the car's rear flanks with the number 500 inside. The Charger 500 was a great street machine. It had power to burn, striking good looks, and it was different from any other car out there, including its brother 69 Chargers. The only problem was there were only 500 of them or less to go around. As a consequence, very few people even saw a Charger 500, much less got the keys to one. Most Charger fans in 1969 had to settle for a regular Charger, a Charger RT, or the ultra-luxurious Charger SE. Pretty good alternatives, huh? By now, the Charger lived at the top of the muscle car mountain. In its second year, this body style was so popular with Mopar faithful that over 20,000 Charger RTs were sold this year. Despite its racing difficulties, it was on its way to becoming one of Chrysler's most popular muscle cars. Sales of all three Charger versions stayed solidly in the 90,000 car range for 1969. But unbelievably, the Dodge engineers still weren't done. There was another 69 Charger waiting in the wings, and this one would blow people's minds from Talladega to Daytona. We'll go for a ride in a winged wonder when the American muscle car returns. After 2 tries at getting the 69 Charger into the winner's circle, Dodge had managed to create a pretty nice race car. But they were still getting trailered every week by the flying Ford Talladegas. One might have thought that Dodge would leave well enough alone for the rest of the year, but no. Dodge was determined to get back on top in NASCAR racing. It was clearly time to get outrageous, and this is outrageous. In late 1969, Dodge's aerodynamics team came up with something truly different, the Daytona. Much of the Charger's 500 wind tunnel work was incorporated into the Daytona. But unlike the 500, this car left nothing on the table. Instead of the flat, flush grille, this one came to a point. With the Charger 500's deck lid spoiler might have helped out a little, the Daytona's wing sitting almost 2 feet above the rear deck slammed the back end of the car to the track. Even the wing's uprights helped straighten the car out if it got loose in a turn. When the Dodge teams unloaded at Talladega in September, the winged wonder let all the air out of everyone else's balloons. All week, the Ford teams had been running in a 185 mph range. But when Charlie Glotzbach ran a practice lap of over 199 mph in the number 88 Daytona, everybody knew that the world had just changed.
Dodge really dropped a bombshell on the NASCAR world with the 69 Charger Daytona, which of course is the wing car. that everybody knows so much about. That car was designed strictly to win on super speedways, and it did a fantastic job of it.
A Charger Daytona driven by Richard Brickhouse won that Talladega race. And a few weeks later, Bobby Isaac's Daytona won the Texas 500. But as the 1969 racing season closed out, the true promise of this car hadn't been realized. The few races run by the Daytona in 1969 had showed everyone that the wing car's aerodynamics were years ahead of tire technology. Dodge would race the '69 Daytona again in 1970, alongside a new wing stablemate from Plymouth, the Superbird. This year, with better tires and upgraded track surfaces, the Charger finally showed the dominance that Chrysler's aero engineers had been trying to achieve since that first fastback Charger back in 1966. It was a long-awaited but satisfying payoff. But in 1971, cars with wings were legislated off the NASCAR tracks. Dodge had proved their point, though. They had set out to own the high-bank superspeedways. And after 5 years and millions of dollars, they had done it. The next generation of Chargers would be the most successful Dodge race cars ever.
He's giving the fans something to remember. One of the greatest runs for the checkered flag ever seen.
When the wings disappeared, it didn't matter to the muscle car crowd one bit. There'd never been enough of them to go around anyway. And the car under the wing was everything you could ask for in a muscle car. In 1971, Dodge merged the Coronet and Charger nameplates, and the car received another restyle. Now there were 6 different models of Charger, from the base coupe or hardtop to 3 Charger 500 models, including the Charger Super Bee and the upscale SE version, and the hot rod of the line, the Charger RT. Even though compression ratios were dropping, Mopar horsepower still lived under the Charger's hood, with the 440 six-pack and the 426 Hemi still the bad boys on the block. The 1971 Charger would be the last hurrah for the Hemi, as the Charger enjoyed one more year as the most stylish of all the muscle cars. But after 1972, like most of the legendary 60s ground pounders, the Charger's muscle car career was over.
The demise of the Charger really kind of follows that of the muscle car in general, and that fuel crisis, insurance rates and things like that kind of spelled the end for the Charger as well as the muscle car.
There's one postscript to the story of the Charger. Maybe the most popular, or at least the most recognized Charger of all time, is this one, the General Lee. Every week for years, a 1969 Charger in Confederate battle dress and a sassy little horn outran the police and chased down bad guys on network television to the delight of millions. A flying Dodge Charger might not have been too realistic, but the Charger did some pretty amazing things in its lifetime. So who's to say? Thanks for watching, and remember, don't crush them, restore them.